The Real Jail Experiment, Part 4, Pod Daddy. Day 2 fades into a rhythm, and that's when crowns start looking for heads. The pod doesn't vote on kings. It appoints them through silence, through fear, through the gravity of a man who can make a room tilt with a stare. This is the birth of the Pod Daddy. Not elected, not assigned, assumed. He stands where the deputy used to stand and acts like the day room is a throne. Phones become his pulpit. Beds become his districts. Commissary becomes taxation dressed up as respect. The experiment didn't create him. It revealed him. Because freedom is a mirror, and if you bring hunger to it, you see power. If you bring love to it, you see responsibility. A new privilege rolls in, and the pod tests it like a lock-picking set. Extra phone access. Free calls at set hours. A bump in commissary funds for the whole unit. On paper, it's trust. In practice, the first hour is clean and the second hour is politics. Who gets the first call to their kids? Who jumps the list for a wife on the outside? Who pays with noodles, stamps, or silence to cut the line? The pod daddy doesn't have to shout. He just leans on the table and the room decides it is better to agree. That is how captivity dresses itself up as order. An elder tries to mediate without giving away the keys. We set a rotation and we stick to it. No skipping, no special passes. Half the pod nods. The other half waits for the loophole. Because rules written on paper don't hold if they are not written in the mind. And the mind is still detoxing from lockdown. The sheriff watches the readouts. Fewer fights, cleaner floors, better communication, and knows numbers can lie. Order is not the same as peace. You can have a quiet unit and still be living under a private warlord. So he steps in for a check-in at the glass and says what he can say without blowing up the experiment. This works only if you refuse to make each other small. This works only if you refuse to tax each other's dignity. Some men hear it. Some men hear their own program instead. One young man, facing life if the wrong pieces fall, gets pulled aside by an older head who hasn't forgotten how to be human. You ain't your charge. Stand up straight. Call your people. Tell your mum you love her. Write the judge a letter from a man, not from fear. It lands. Not like a sermon, but like air. He walks back to the phone list without cutting. He waits his turn. When he finishes, he wipes the receiver and hands it off with a thank you the room is not used to hearing. That is what privilege can do when love is the teacher. It turns access into ownership, and ownership into care. But the other current is running just as hard. The pod daddy checks paperwork. He decides who is solid and who is a problem, and he collects behind closed doors so the cameras see order while the day room pays a tax. You can spot the pattern in small frictions. A man moves bunks without asking. A game of spades becomes a toll booth. Someone gets told to hold it down when what he needs is to speak up. Fear writes fast. Respect writes slow. He unit is learning which handwriting lasts. New privilege invites new schemes. Hooch talk gets louder. Tattoo talk gets clever. Gifts begin to circulate as favors, then as fees, then as obligations. It is the same staircase every jail has walked. Only now the hand on the rail is not wearing a badge. The experiment is doing its real work by making the trade visible. Protection or predation, brotherhood or business. You cannot hold both in the same hand. The elders who want this to work start modeling a different gravity. They don't bark. They stand where harm could start and make it inconvenient to begin. They enforce without humiliation. And that turns out to be the only enforcement that sticks. Because humiliation breeds revenge, and revenge breeds lockdown. A deputy catches the vibe through the glass and chooses restraint. He could flood the pod with bodies and reset the old order in 10 minutes. Instead, he lets the room try to self-correct. If it fails, the doors will slam and the headlines will write themselves. If it holds, 6 weeks could change 6 years for the men who learn how to carry weight without throwing it. Meanwhile, the pod daddy makes his first big mistake. He confuses compliance with consent. He mistakes quiet for respect. He doesn't notice the small coalition forming around a simple idea. House rules that protect everyone, including him. No stealing. No weapons. Phones rotate. Conflicts go to the circle, not the floor. Everybody cleans. Nobody taxes. It sounds basic, but basic is what saves a ship in heavy seas. And the seas are heavy. Word spreads that a few men are making side deals with commissary cash. Another rumor says someone is hoarding the free time slots for his people only. The elders press pause. We either all rise or we all go back in the cell. Pick. That word hits different when it's backed by the truth that deputies can end the experiment in a single radio call. A younger man tries to flex anyway. Loud voice, short fuse, eyes on the OG's chair. The room watches to see if the crown will slide. The elder doesn't move. He names the line. We ain't running this on fear. We're running this on respect. You want in, act like you live here, not like you own it. There is a long, important silence. The crown wobbles. It doesn't fall, yet. But the room just learns something it will need tomorrow. Leadership that protects people will be tested by leadership that protects ego. Only one of them can survive 6 weeks. The man facing life circles back to the elder after lights out. Appreciate you. I forgot what it felt like to be treated like I matter. The elder nods and points at the unlocked door. Remember it. It's a door in here first. That is the line of the episode. Not the sound of metal, but the sound of a mind deciding what kind of leader it will obey. Because that is what the pod daddy really is. A decision, not a person. A decision to organize around fear or around love. To tax or to tend. To perform power or to protect the weak. By the end of part 4, the pod has a routine, a pressure system, and a shadow government. But it also has a counterweight. Men who want the door to stay open so badly they will sand their pride down to keep it that way. Tomorrow, those two currents hit a spark. Fire and hooch. Will heat harden the pod into something solid or burn it back into lockdown? Pick your teacher now, because the next test won't wait for you to study.